Halloween 2018 started like any other year. I was working as a cashier at a 24-hour gas station just outside Denver, pulling the night shift. I actually liked working Halloween. Customers came in wearing wild costumes. Everyone was in a good mood, and the tips were better than usual. Around 11 p.m., things started to slow down. The trick-or-treaters had gone home, and the adult parties were in full swing. I was alone in the store, scrolling through my phone when the door chime went off. A man walked in wearing what looked like an expensive werewolf costume. I mean, this thing was Hollywood quality. Realistic fur, extended snout, sharp teeth, visible when he breathed. Even his hands had these elaborate claw gloves. The way he moved was perfect too, sort of hunched and predatory. I complimented his costume as he prowled through the aisles. He didn't respond, just made this low growling sound. Method actor, I figured. He spent maybe 5 minutes in the store, picking up beef jerky, energy drinks, and weirdly, several packages of raw ground beef from our small refrigerated section. When he came to the counter, I got a better look at the costume. The detail was insane. I could see individual hairs moving when he breathed, and his eyes, they must have been contacts, were this bright yellow color that seemed to glow under the fluorescence. The smell hit me then too. Not quite body odor, but something wild and musky, like wet dog mixed with something else I couldn't place. He paid in crumpled cash, and that's when I noticed the claws weren't gloves. They were attached to his actual fingers somehow, moving naturally as he counted out bills. The skin where they connected looked red and irritated. This guy had seriously committed to his costume. As I rang him up, he kept staring at me, not in a creepy way exactly, but like he was sizing me up, calculating something. When I handed him his change, our hands touched briefly. His skin was burning hot, like he had a serious fever. He left without saying a word, and I watched him walk across the parking lot. His car was parked in the shadows at the edge of the lot, a beat-up van with mud-covered plates. He threw his purchases in the back and drove off. 20 minutes later, a couple rushed in. They looked terrified, the woman crying, and the man's shirt torn and bloody. They said something had attacked them at the hiking trail parking area about a mile down the road. The man had deep scratches on his arm and shoulder, like claw marks. They said they'd been making out in their car when something started circling it. At first, they thought it was a bear, but then it stood up on 2 legs and started scratching at the windows. The thing was huge, covered in dark fur, with a long snout. When it couldn't get in, it had climbed onto the hood and started pounding on the windshield until it cracked. The man managed to start the car and peel out while the thing was still on the hood. It had rolled off and chased them for maybe 50 yards before disappearing into the woods. They came straight to my store to call the police. While we waited for the cops, I kept thinking about Werewolf Guy. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence, but when I mentioned the customer in the costume, the couple got even more upset. The woman said what attacked them wasn't wearing a costume. She said she'd seen its muscles moving under the fur, seen its breath fogging up their windshield. No costume could do that. The woman was shaking so bad, she could barely hold the cup of coffee I'd given her. She kept describing details, how the thing's ears had moved independently, tracking sounds, how its nose had twitched when it sniffed at their car. The man showed me his wounds. 4 parallel gashes, too wide to be from any normal animal. The bleeding wouldn't stop, just kept seeping through the paper towels we'd wrapped around his arm. The police took their reports seriously. There had been similar calls from other areas that night. Animal attacks, they said. Maybe a rabid bear or mountain lion. They warned me to keep the doors locked and call immediately if I saw anything unusual. 2 officers stayed behind to look at our security footage. They wanted to see if anyone suspicious had been in the area. I didn't mention Werewolf Guy at first, but something made me pull up that transaction. I wanted them to see what I'd seen, to confirm I wasn't going crazy. But when I pulled up the recording, something was wrong. The timestamp showed him entering the store, showed me talking to someone, showed me making a transaction, but there was no one else visible in the footage. Just me, apparently having a conversation with empty air, taking money from no one, handing change to nobody. The officers looked at me like I was having a breakdown. One of them asked if I'd been drinking, if maybe the stress of the night was getting to me. I insisted someone had been there, even showed them the transaction record in our system. Cash sale, $47.16. The money was in the register. But on the video, I was just standing there, moving my mouth, handling money that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The parking lot camera was even stranger. It showed his van clearly, but the driver's seat looked empty when he got in. The vehicle just started up and drove away on its own. The officers made copies of everything but told me it was probably a camera malfunction. Halloween brought out pranksters who liked to mess with technology, they said. After everyone left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow outside seemed to move. Every normal night, sound, the ice machine cycling, the coffee pot gurgling, made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard scratching at the back door. Long, deliberate scratches, like claws on metal. I didn't go check. I locked myself in the office with a baseball bat and waited for dawn. When my manager arrived at 6, there were deep gouges in the back door, 4 parallel lines, right through the metal. He blamed vandals, said we'd been having problems with kids damaging property. But I knew better. I spent the rest of my shift terrified, jumping at every sound. When morning came, I practically ran to my car. I quit that job 2 days later. Told my manager I needed to focus on school, but really, I just couldn't handle another night shift, especially not alone. 3 weeks later, I saw a news story that made my blood run cold. A hiker had found remains in the woods near that trail. Not human remains, deer, rabbits, even a coyote, all partially eaten, all killed in the same way. Throat torn out, body cavity opened, organs missing. The wildlife experts said it was unusual. Most predators don't kill multiple animals without eating them fully. These looked almost ritualistic. The police never found what attacked that couple. There were 3 more reports that Halloween night, torn clothes, claw marks, sightings of something big and bipedal. One witness, a drunk guy leaving a bar, swore he saw it transform. Said he watched a massive wolf-like creature shrink down, fur retracting, until a naked man stood in its place. The cops dismissed him as intoxicated, but his description of the man matched my customer, right down to the yellow eyes. The official explanation was a bear that had wandered into populated areas. They shot a black bear a week later and declared the problem solved. But the scratches didn't match bear claws. The behavioral pattern was all wrong. And bears don't pay for beef jerky with exact change. I still work retail, but never night shifts. And never, ever on Halloween. Sometimes I have nightmares about those yellow eyes, about that burning hot skin. Wake up, smelling that wild musk. And every October, when I see Halloween werewolf decorations in store windows, I remember that not all monsters are make-believe. Some of them walk among us, buying ground beef and energy drinks, waiting for the right night to hunt. Every kid in our neighborhood knew about the Pemberton house. It was this massive Victorian at the end of Sycamore Lane, and every Halloween, they gave out full-size candy bars. Not fun size, not mini, the real deal. Snickers, Milky Ways, Twix, you name it. Kids would hit that house 2 or 3 times a night, changing masks between visits. I was 34 in 2020, recently divorced, and had just moved back to my childhood neighborhood in Salem, Massachusetts, with my 8-year-old son Tyler. Halloween was different that year because of COVID. Lots of houses had set up candy chutes or tables at the end of driveways, but not the Pembertons. They were old school, wanted kids to come right up to the door like always. Tyler was so excited. He'd heard about the legendary full-size bars from the other kids and couldn't wait. We started our route around 6:30, hitting the regular houses first, saving the Pemberton place for last like dessert. The house looked exactly like I remembered from my own childhood. 3 stories, wraparound porch, Gothic windows. They'd gone all out with decorations, animated skeletons, fog machines, speakers playing creepy music. A line of kids stretched down their front walk. What I didn't remember from my childhood was how wrong the house felt. Maybe it was my adult awareness, but something about the place made my skin crawl. The fog from their machines seemed thicker than it should be, clinging to the ground like it was alive. The skeleton decorations were too anatomically correct, and their movements seemed less mechanical and more deliberate. "Mrs. Pemberton answered the door, and I swear she hadn't aged a day in 25 years. Same silver hair in a tight bun, same velvet dress, same too wide smile. She recognized me immediately, knew my maiden name and everything. Said she was so glad I'd moved back, that the neighborhood needed more original families. Her husband appeared behind her, and he looked exactly the same too. Not similar, exactly the same. Same horn-rimmed glasses, same sweater vest, same pattern of liver spots on his hands. I remembered those spots from when I was 9 years old, trick or treating at this very door. They hadn't changed position, hadn't grown or faded. 25 years, and not a single detail was different. She made a big fuss over Tyler, commenting on his Spider-Man costume, asking his name and age. Then she did something weird. She put her hand on his head, closed her eyes for a second, and nodded, like she was checking something. Then she reached into her giant cauldron of candy and pulled out not one but 3 full-size bars for him. But it wasn't just a casual touch. Her fingers pressed against specific spots on his skull, like she was feeling for something beneath the skin. Tyler winced a little, and I saw her lips moving silently, counting or reciting something. Mr. Pemberton watched intently, and they exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Satisfaction, confirmation. Tyler was thrilled with his candy haul. As we walked away, I noticed Mrs. Pemberton doing that same thing with other kids. The hand on the head, the pause, the nod. Some kids got 1 bar, some got 3. There didn't seem to be a pattern. I watched more carefully. The kids who got 3 bars all had something in common, but I couldn't figure out what. Different ages, different costumes, different ethnicities. But Mrs. Pemberton selected them with purpose, marking them somehow. Her husband kept a small notebook, making quick marks after each child. We went home. Tyler dumped out his haul, and everything seemed fine. Until bedtime. He started complaining about feeling dizzy, said his stomach hurt. I figured it was too much candy, gave him some water and Tums. But then he started burning up. Within an hour, his temperature hit 103. His eyes were the worst part. They kept rolling back, showing just the whites, and he was mumbling things that didn't make sense. Not quite words, but patterns of sound that seemed almost like another language. His hands kept making the same gesture over and over, fingers spread, palm pressing down, like he was trying to push something away. I was about to take him to the ER when my phone rang. It was my neighbor Lisa, sounding panicked. Her daughter was sick too. Same symptoms, same sudden onset. Then my phone started blowing up, text after text from neighborhood parents. All their kids were sick. All of them had visited the Pemberton house. The group chat was chaos. Kids with fevers over 104. Kids speaking in tongues. Kids drawing the same symbol over and over, a circle with 3 lines through it. One mother sent a video of her son standing at his window, pressing his forehead against the glass, pointing toward the Pemberton house and whispering numbers in sequence. Someone called the police. Within an hour, the street was full of ambulances and cop cars. They were taking kids to 3 different hospitals because one ER couldn't handle them all. The police went to question the Pembertons, but the house was dark and no one answered. But here's the thing, neighbors saw them leave. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Mr. and Mrs. Pemberton walking down the street just after sunset, going door to door, not driving, walking. They were checking on the sick children, peering through windows, standing in yards. One father chased them off with a baseball bat, said they were just standing in his driveway, staring up at his daughter's bedroom window, both of them swaying slightly in unison. At the hospital, doctors ran every test imaginable. The kids all had the same symptoms: high fever, elevated white cell count, and something else weird. Their blood showed markers for diseases that didn't make sense. Old diseases, things like scarlet fever, tuberculosis, polio, diseases that had been virtually eradicated. But the kids didn't actually have these diseases, just the antibody markers, like they'd been exposed to them somehow. The head of infectious diseases was baffled. She told me it was like the children's immune systems had suddenly activated against threats that hadn't existed for decades. Some of the markers were for diseases she couldn't even identify, things that weren't in any medical database, ancient things. Tyler was in the hospital for 3 days. Other kids were there longer. Everyone recovered eventually, but it was terrifying. The candy was tested, but came back clean. No poison, no drugs, nothing. The health department couldn't explain what had happened. During those 3 days, I did research, obsessive research. The Pembertons had owned that house for at least 60 years, according to property records, but I found photos of them at town events going back further, much further. A 4th of July picnic in 1962, a Christmas charity drive in 1958, a World War II victory celebration in 1945. Always the same faces, same ages, same 2 wide smiles. The really disturbing part came later. I started researching, talking to longtime neighbors. Turns out, every few years, there's a Halloween where lots of kids get mysteriously sick. Always kids who visited the Pemberton house. Always the same weird blood test results. But here's the thing, it's never all the kids who visit, just some of them. I found a pattern in old newspaper archives. 1,996, 1,987, 1,979, 1,971. Every 8 to 9 years, a mysterious illness affecting several local children on Halloween night. The articles were always buried in the back pages, always dismissed as food poisoning or coincidence. But the symptoms were identical to what our kids experienced. I tracked down a woman whose son had gotten sick in 1995. She told me something that made my skin crawl. She said her son, now grown, had never been sick again after that Halloween. Not once. No colds, no flu, no infections. Perfect health for 25 years. She'd talked to other parents from that year, and their kids were the same. Whatever had made them sick had also changed something in their immune systems, made them stronger somehow. But she also told me about the ones who didn't recover quickly, the kids who stayed sick for weeks instead of days. They were different afterward. Smarter, she said, but colder, less emotional. They all went on to successful careers, doctors, researchers, scientists, but they never seemed quite right. Never married, never had close friends, like something essentially human had been traded for something else. The police never found the Pembertons. The house has been empty since that night. The full-size candy bars were just normal candy from Costco. No explanation for what happened. The official report blamed it on mass hysteria, said the blood test anomalies were lab errors. But I know what I felt when Mrs. Pemberton touched Tyler's head. It was like static electricity, but cold. And I remember how she looked at certain kids, like she was seeing something in them that others didn't have, selecting them for something. Tyler hasn't been sick since that Halloween. Not even a sniffle. He's 12 now, strong as an ox. Sometimes, I wonder if I should be grateful or terrified. The other kids who got sick that night are the same way. Perfect health, perfect attendance at school. Their parents whisper about it sometimes, but no one wants to say it out loud. They all have other changes too. Tyler can do math in his head that should be impossible for his age. He knows things sometimes, says them casually, like when the phone's about to ring, or what someone's about to say. The other kids from that night are the same, top of their classes, but unsettling in ways that are hard to define. The Pemberton house is still empty. Every Halloween, kids dare each other to go knock on the door, but no one ever does. The full-size candy bar legend has become something else now. A warning. Last month, I saw a real estate listing for the house. The price was ridiculously low, and it's been on the market for 3 years. The realtor told me, interested buyers always back out after the inspection, not because of structural problems, but because of the basement. She wouldn't tell me what was down there, just that contractors refused to work on the house. I've thought about trying to track down the Pembertons, finding out what they did and why. But part of me doesn't want to know. Part of me is afraid that if I dig too deep, they might come back. And I don't know if what they gave our kids was a gift or something else. Something that hasn't shown its true purpose yet. Every Halloween, Tyler asks if we can trick or treat on Sycamore Lane. He says he dreams about the Pemberton house sometimes. Dreams where Mrs. Pemberton is calling the children back, saying it's time for the next phase. I always tell him we're going to a different neighborhood. But each year, it gets harder to keep him away. We trick or treat across town now. But sometimes I drive past Sycamore Lane, and I swear I see lights in the Pemberton house windows. Just for a second, like someone's home, waiting. I'd been driving for Uber for about 6 months when Halloween 2019 rolled around. The money on Halloween night was insane. Surge pricing all night, drunk people tipping heavy, constant rides. I planned to drive until 3 or 4 in the morning, make a killing. I was working the Chicago suburbs, picking up costumed partygoers and bar hoppers. Everything was routine until around midnight. That's when I got a ping for a pickup at Resurrection Cemetery. Yeah, that Resurrection Cemetery, the one with all the ghost stories about Resurrection Mary. Now, I'm not superstitious, but picking someone up from a cemetery at midnight on Halloween felt like the start of a bad horror movie. But the surge was 3.5x, and I figured it was probably just cemetery workers or some goth kids doing a Halloween thing. The app showed the pickup point right at the main entrance on Archer Avenue. The rider's name just showed as Mary, no last name, which was unusual. 5-star rating, though, which made me feel a little better. The profile photo was blank, just the default grey silhouette. I pulled up to the main gates, which were closed and locked. No one was around. The cemetery looked different at night. The headstones caught in my headlights seemed to glow, and fog was rolling in from somewhere, thick and unnatural for October. I was about to cancel when I saw her, a woman in a white dress standing about 50 feet inside the cemetery gates. She was waving at me, clearly my passenger. I called out that the gates were locked. She walked closer, and I could see her better in my headlights. Young, maybe early 20s, long blonde hair, vintage-looking white party dress. She looked cold. She pointed to a section where the fence was damaged, a gap just big enough for a person to squeeze through. The dress was what got me. It wasn't a costume. It was real vintage, probably from the 1960 seconds, cream-colored with pearl buttons, the kind of thing you'd see in old photographs. But it was pristine, like it had just been pressed. No dirt, no tears. Despite her being in a cemetery, her hair was done up in this elaborate style with pin curls, and she was wearing white gloves. Everything about her seemed out of time. Everything in me said to drive away, but she looked so normal, so harmless. Just a girl who needed a ride. Maybe she'd been visiting a grave, got locked in. I told myself I was being paranoid. She squeezed through the fence gap and got in my back seat. The car immediately felt colder, and she smelled like earth and flowers. Not bad, just odd. Like funeral flowers mixed with fresh-turned soil. My breath started fogging up, and the windows began to mist over from the inside. I asked where she was headed, and she gave me an address in Justice, about 15 minutes away. Her voice was soft, had this quality like it was coming from far away. She kept her hands folded in her lap, and I noticed her gloves were yellowed at the fingertips, like old paper. We drove in silence at first. I tried making small talk, asking about her costume, but she just stared out the window. Finally, she spoke. She said she was trying to get home, that she'd been trying for a long time. Her voice was soft, kind of dreamy. She started asking me questions. Did I have someone waiting for me at home? Did I ever feel like time moved differently at night? Had I ever loved someone so much it felt like dying when they left? The questions were strange, but her voice was hypnotic. I found myself answering honestly, telling her about my recent divorce, my loneliness, my night shifts. She asked if I believed in second chances. Strange question, but Halloween brings out the philosophical in people. I said sure, everyone deserves a second chance. She smiled at that, but it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. That's when I noticed the radio had gone to static. Not normal static, it had this pattern to it, like voices trying to break through. The GPS on my phone started glitching, the little blue dot showing my location jumping all over the map. The temperature gauge on my dashboard dropped to the lowest reading, but the engine was running fine. About halfway to the destination, she started telling me a story. Said she'd been at a dance, met a boy, fell in love, in that instant way you do when you're young. They'd danced all night, and he'd offered to drive her home. But they'd been drinking. People didn't think about that stuff as much back then. The car had gone off the road, hit a tree. She'd died on impact. He'd lived, carried that guilt forever. She touched the back of my seat as she talked, and I felt the cold through the fabric. She said she could still hear the music from that dance sometimes, still feel his arms around her. Said every Halloween, she tried to finish that last ride home. But something always went wrong. The driver would get scared, or the sun would come up, or she'd simply fade away before reaching the house. I looked in the rearview mirror to respond, and my blood went cold. The back seat looked empty. I could hear her voice, could smell that earth and flower scent, but in the mirror, nothing. I almost crashed the car, but when I turned around, she was there, solid as could be, looking at me with those sad eyes. She asked me not to be afraid, said she wasn't going to hurt anyone. She just wanted to go home. Just once, she wanted to finish the journey. She reached out and touched my shoulder. Her hand was ice cold, and where she touched, my jacket started to frost over. She told me I was different from the others. Most people couldn't see her at all, and the ones who could usually fled in terror. But I was still driving, still helping. My hands were shaking, but I kept driving. What else could I do? Jump out on the highway, call the cops and say I had a ghost in my car? I focused on the road and tried not to think about what was happening. The address she'd given me was a small house on a quiet street. Looked like it had been built in the 50s. As I pulled up, all the lights were off except for one in an upstairs window. She thanked me for the ride, said I was kind. Then she asked me to wait, just for a minute, to make sure she got inside okay. She got out and walked up to the front door. Didn't knock, just stood there. The porch light flickered on, though I hadn't seen anyone inside move to turn it on. After maybe 30 seconds, the door opened. An elderly man stood there, had to be in his 80s. He looked at her for a long moment, then his face just crumbled. He started crying, reached out like he wanted to touch her but was afraid she'd disappear. I heard him say Mary, just that, just her name. She said something I couldn't hear, and he nodded. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. The porch light flickered, and for just a second, I swear she looked transparent, like I could see through her to the door behind. He was speaking to her, rapidly, desperately. I couldn't make out the words, but I could see his lips moving, see the tears streaming down his face. She put her hand on his cheek, and he closed his eyes. They stood like that for what felt like forever but was probably only seconds. Then, the light steadied, and she was gone. Just gone. The old man was standing there, arms still raised like he was hugging air. But his face, he looked peaceful, like a weight had been lifted. He noticed me watching, raised one hand in a wave, then went inside and closed the door. I sat there for probably 5 minutes, trying to process what I'd seen. Finally checked my phone. The ride was there in my history, but the passenger name just said, Mary. No last name, no profile picture. The payment had processed, $47.50 for a 15-minute ride. The exact fare amount seemed significant somehow. Old prices for an old soul. The car still smelled like funeral flowers. The windows were still fogged. On the back seat, there was a small water stain in the shape of where she'd been sitting. But strangest of all, my phone showed the ride as 5 stars, with a comment, "Thank you for taking me home. I drove home in a daze. Couldn't sleep, so I did what any rational person would do. I Googled, searched for car accidents. Young women named Mary, Justice, Illinois. Found it in an archived newspaper from 1963. Mary Bregovy, 21, killed in a car accident returning from a dance. The driver, her date, was named Joseph Bregovy, same last name. They'd been married just 3 months. The newspaper photo showed a young woman who looked exactly like my passenger. Same face, same hairstyle, even the same dress. The article mentioned she'd been driving home from a Halloween dance at the Willowbrook Ballroom. Her husband had survived with minor injuries but never remarried, never moved from their little house in Justice. I found Joseph's obituary too, from 3 days after my ride. Said he'd died peacefully in his sleep, finally reunited with his beloved wife Mary after 56 years. The funeral notice mentioned he'd spent every Halloween waiting for her, believing she'd come home someday. His family thought it was dementia, but he never wavered. Every October 31st, he'd turn on the porch light and wait. I've never told anyone this part, but the obituary included a photo of Joseph as a young man. I recognized him. Not from that night. He was far too old. But I'd seen that face before, in my car, just for a second. When Mary disappeared and the old man closed the door, I thought I saw someone else on the porch. A young man in a 1960 suit, taking her hand, leading her inside. I've thought about that night constantly for the past 5 years, tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an elaborate prank, maybe I had some kind of episode, but I know what I experienced. And I have that ride in my history, that payment in my account. I looked up the house last year. It's been sold, renovated, a young family lives there now. They have no idea about Mary and Joseph. But every Halloween, they told the realtor, the porch light turns on by itself at midnight, just for a few minutes. They've had electricians check it, but no one can find a problem. It's become a quirky feature they tell guests about at parties. I still drive Uber, but never on Halloween. And I never pick up near cemeteries, no matter how high the surge. Some money isn't worth earning, some rides aren't meant to be taken, and some journeys take longer to complete than others. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night and see someone in white by the side of the road, I slow down, just in case, because everyone deserves to make it home eventually. And maybe, just maybe, I was meant to be the one who finally got her there. After all those years of waiting, after all those Halloween nights of trying, Mary Bregovi finally made it home. I think about Joseph too, waiting all those years, never giving up hope. His family thought he was crazy, but he knew she'd find a way back to him. Love like that doesn't die, not even when the people do. It just waits, patient and eternal, for the right moment to reunite. That's why I can't dismiss what happened as a hallucination or a prank. It was too real, too specific, too full of pain and love and longing. I was just the driver, the facilitator of something that needed to happen, and in a strange way, I'm grateful. In all my nights of driving, all the drunk passengers and long shifts, that one ride meant something. I helped 2 souls find each other again.